The Alpha King followed the chanting deep into the forest that night. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to be. It drifted through the pine trees like smoke, threading between branches heavy with frost, weaving through shadows that seemed to breathe with their own dark purpose. Damien had been patrolling the northern border when he'd caught it, a rhythm that didn't belong to wind or wildlife, something deliberate and ancient that made his wolf stir uneasily beneath his skin. He should have called for his second. Should have alerted the guard. But something primal in his chest urged him forward, alone, into the deepest part of the territory where even pack members rarely ventured. The trees grew denser here, their trunks twisted like arthritic fingers clawing at the sky. Moonlight struggled to penetrate the canopy, leaving only fragmented silver pools on the forest floor. The chanting grew clearer. Multiple voices now, speaking in the old tongue, words his grandmother had taught him as a boy, words that belonged to rituals from a time when packs didn't just protect territory, but commanded it through blood and bone magic. Damien's breath misted in the freezing air. Winter had come early this year, vicious and unrelenting. Ice coated the undergrowth, making each step crunch beneath his boots. He moved like a predator, silent despite the frozen ground, his alpha senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Something was wrong. The forest itself felt wrong, too quiet, as if every living thing had fled from what was happening ahead. Then he smelled it. Blood. Not the sharp tang of a hunt or the metallic bite of a border skirmish. This was different. Older. Ritualistic. The scent carried power with it, thick and cloying, making his wolf snarl in warning. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to leave whatever darkness waited ahead undisturbed. But an alpha king didn't run from shadows in his own territory. Damien pushed through a wall of frost-laden brambles and stopped dead. The clearing opened before him like a wound carved into the forest. Ancient stones formed a perfect circle, each one taller than a man, their surfaces carved with symbols that predated the written histories of his pack. The elders stood at intervals around the circle, 12 of them, hooded figures whose faces he couldn't see but whose identities he knew. These were the pack's most trusted advisors, the keepers of tradition, the voices that had guided his father and his grandfather before him. They were chanting in unison now, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic cadence that made the air itself vibrate. Power thrummed through the clearing, so thick Damien could taste it on his tongue, bitter, like copper and ash. And at the center of the ritual circle, bound in silver chains that glowed with an unnatural light, was a woman. She knelt on the frozen ground, her body rigid with pain, her head thrown back as if she were screaming though no sound escaped her lips. Silver, the one metal that could burn through shifter flesh like acid, wrapped around her wrists, her ankles, her throat. Each chain was anchored to the stones, keeping her suspended in the exact center of the circle, unable to move, unable to escape. But it wasn't the chains that made Damien's blood run cold. It was what was happening to her. Light poured from her body, not the warm golden glow of a healthy shifter's aura, but something raw and violent, like liquid starlight being ripped from her very soul. It spiraled upward in tendrils that writhed and twisted, feeding into the stones, feeding into the earth, feeding into something vast and hungry that he couldn't see but could feel pressing down on the clearing like an invisible weight. The woman's skin was translucent, veins visible beneath like dark rivers. Her hair, long and dark, matted with sweat and frost, clung to her face and shoulders. She wore only a thin white shift that offered no protection against the cold, and her bare feet were blue against the frozen ground. She was dying. Damien could see it in the way her chest barely rose and fell, in the tremor that ran through her frame with each pulse of stolen light. Whatever this ritual was doing, it was consuming her, burning through her life force like kindling. And then the wind shifted. Her scent hit him like a physical blow, wild honey and midnight rain, earth after a storm, something impossibly familiar that made his wolf surge forward with a desperate, primal need. His vision sharpened. The world narrowed to her and only her. The bond snapped into place between them with such force it drove the air from his lungs. Mate. The word echoed through every cell in his body, absolute and undeniable. She was his true mate, the one the moon herself had chosen for him, the one whose soul was meant to fit against his like two halves of an ancient whole. And his pack elders were killing her. Damien's mind reeled, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How long had this been happening? How long had they been using her, feeding off her life to power whatever dark magic sustained the pack's dominance over the territory? He thought of the past 3 years, how the pack had grown stronger, how their borders had expanded, how enemies had fallen before them with unnatural ease. He'd attributed it to good strategy, to his father's wisdom and his own strength as the new Alpha King. But it had been her. All of it had been bought with her suffering. One of the elders finally noticed him. The chanting faltered. Hoods turned in his direction, and Damien found himself staring at faces he'd known his entire life, advisors who had bounced him on their knees as a child, who had crowned him Alpha King when his father died, who had sworn oaths of loyalty with their hands over their hearts. The eldest, Corvin, stepped forward. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "My king, you shouldn't be here. This is not for your eyes." Damien's hands curled into fists. His wolf was snarling, demanding he tear through the circle, break the chains, save her. But the alpha in him, trained since childhood to consider the pack above all else, forced him to speak. "What is this?" "Necessity," Corvin replied simply. "The ritual that has kept us strong. That has made us untouchable. Your father knew of it. His father before him. It is the price of power, my king. One life, for the survival of thousands. One life." Damien's voice came out raw, barely controlled. "She's my mate." A ripple of shock moved through the circle. Several elders exchanged glances. But Corvin's expression didn't change. The moon makes mistakes sometimes. This one was born cursed, too much power, too dangerous to live free. We have contained that power. Channeled it. If you break the circle now, everything we've built will crumble. The rival packs will sense our weakness. They will come for us. The woman's head lifted slightly. Through the curtain of her hair, Damien caught a glimpse of her face, gaunt, pale, beautiful in the way broken things are beautiful. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw not pleading, not hope, but a terrible resignation. She expected him to walk away. Expected him to choose the pack, just as everyone before him had chosen the pack over her. The chanting resumed, louder now, more urgent. The elders were trying to complete the ritual before he could interfere. Light poured from her in waves, and she convulsed against the chains, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Damien stood at the edge of the circle, frozen between two impossible choices. Save her, his mate, the other half of his soul, and watch his pack fall into chaos and war. Or walk away, let her die, and rule over a kingdom built on her bones. The forest held its breath. And the Alpha King had to decide what kind of man he was willing to become. Damien moved. Not with thought. Not with strategy. Pure instinct drove him forward, the instinct of a mate who would burn the world before watching his other half suffer. His wolf exploded to the surface, power rippling through the clearing like a shockwave. The air itself seemed to bow under the weight of his alpha command. Stop. One word. But it carried the force of a king's decree, laced with dominance so absolute that every elder flinched. The chanting died mid-syllable. The ritual light flickered, stuttered, then dimmed as the flow of power disrupted. Corvin stepped forward, hands raised. "My king, you don't understand what you're." "I understand perfectly." Damien's voice was granite and ice. "You've been bleeding my mate dry to fuel your ambitions." "How long, Corvin? How many years has she been trapped in this circle?" The silence that followed told him everything. 5 years, a smaller voice said. One of the younger elders, a woman named Talia, who'd always seemed more reluctant than the others. Since before your father died. She was found at the border. A rogue with no pack, no family. But she carried old magic in her blood. The kind our ancestors used to wield. We couldn't let such power go to waste. 5 years. 5 years this woman had been chained and tortured while he'd walked the Packlands as prince and then king, completely unaware. 5 years she'd screamed in silence while he'd celebrated victories built on her agony. Damien's hands shook with barely contained rage. Her name. She never told us, Talia said quietly. She stopped speaking after the first year. He looked at the woman in the center of the circle. She was watching him now with those haunted eyes, her body still trembling from the interrupted ritual. The silver chains glowed brighter, reacting to his proximity, burning deeper into her flesh. He could see the raw, blistered skin beneath them, wounds that had never been allowed to heal. I'm going to break these chains, Damien said, speaking directly to her now. His voice gentled, though fury still blazed beneath every word. I'm going to get you out of here. Do you understand me? She didn't respond. Didn't nod. Didn't show any sign she'd heard him at all. But something flickered in her eyes, not hope, but perhaps the faintest ember of something that might become hope if it wasn't extinguished first. My king. Corvin's voice had hardened now, losing its veneer of respect. If you break the circle, the power will backlash. It could kill her instantly. The ritual must be completed or carefully unwound over days. You cannot simply. Then tell me how to unwind it. It would take a week. Maybe more. And during that time, the pack's strength would wane. The Shadowfang pack has been watching our borders. The Ironwood Alliance has been waiting for any sign of weakness. If they sense vulnerability, they will strike. Hundreds will die. Children, elders, innocents. Is one life worth that cost? Damien turned to face the council fully. His eyes blazed gold, his wolf so close to the surface that his human form barely contained it. You're asking me to choose between my mate and my pack. We're asking you to be the king your father was, Corvin said firmly. To make the hard choices. To sacrifice what must be sacrificed for the greater good. My father knew about this. He approved it. He understood that power requires sacrifice. Something inside Damien cracked. His father, the man he'd idolized, the king he'd tried to emulate, had known. Had allowed this. Had probably stood in this very clearing and made the same choice Damien was being asked to make now. But his father had never had to look at his own mate dying in chains. Damien walked toward the circle's edge. The stones hummed with power, ancient wards designed to keep the ritual contained. Breaking them would be dangerous. The elders weren't lying about that. The magical backlash could indeed kill her if done wrong. But leaving her here would definitely kill her. He could see it in the gray tinge to her skin, the way her breathing had become shallow and irregular. Whatever the ritual was taking from her, she didn't have much left to give. What's your name? He asked softly, crouching just outside the circle so he could meet her eyes at her level. She stared at him. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to answer but had forgotten how. When was the last time someone had asked her name? When was the last time someone had looked at her and seen a person instead of a resource to be exploited? I'm Damien, he continued, keeping his voice low and steady. I'm the Alpha King, and I'm going to get you out of here. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Still no response. But her eyes, pale gray, like storm clouds, tracked his every movement. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something else. Wariness. She'd been betrayed too many times to trust easily, even now. Especially now. She won't speak to you, Corvin said dismissively. She's more animal than woman at this point. The ritual has taken too much. Whatever she was before, she's just a shell now. A vessel. You can't save someone who's already gone. Damien's growl ripped through the clearing. Several elders stepped back. She's not gone. I can feel her through the bond. She's still in there, still fighting. And if you're wrong? Corvin challenged. If you break the circle and she dies anyway? If the pack falls to our enemies because you chose sentiment over duty? How will you live with that, my king? It was a fair question. A terrible question. The kind of question that had no good answer. Damien looked at the woman again. At his mate. At the person whose soul was supposed to be tangled with his for whatever time they had in this world. She was still watching him with those gray eyes that had seen too much suffering. And then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. One word. Barely a whisper. Raw and broken from years of screaming. Marin. Her name. She'd given him her name. Damien's chest tightened. It was such a small thing, a name. But it was everything. It was proof that Corvin was wrong, that she hadn't been completely consumed by the ritual's hunger. Somewhere beneath the pain and the resignation, Marin was still herself. Still aware. Still choosing, in this moment, to reach back toward him even when reaching out had brought her nothing but more pain before. Marin, Damien repeated, and watched something shift in her expression. Recognition. Relief. The simple human need to be seen as more than a tool or a curse. I'm going to break these chains now. It's going to hurt. The backlash will hurt both of us. But I promise you, I swear on my life and my crown, I will not let you die in this circle. You'll doom us all, Corvin said flatly. Then we'll face that doom together. Damien stood, his decision made. He looked at each elder in turn, letting them see the alpha dominance burning in his eyes. This ritual ends tonight. If any of you try to stop me, you'll answer to me as traitors. Am I clear? No one moved. No one dared. Damien turned back to Marin. She was looking at him differently now, not with hope, not yet, but with something fragile and tentative. The beginning of belief. He stepped into the circle. The wards shrieked. Power slammed into him like a physical blow, trying to force him back, trying to protect the integrity of the ritual. But Damien was an alpha king, born of a bloodline that had ruled these lands for generations. He pushed through the resistance, his wolf lending him strength, and reached for the first silver chain wrapped around Marin's wrist. The moment his fingers touched the metal, pain exploded through his body. Silver burned shifters, but this silver was worse. It carried the weight of 5 years of stolen magic, 5 years of accumulated agony. It felt like holding lightning, like clutching broken glass dipped in acid. Damien didn't let go. He pulled. The chain resisted, bound by ritual and blood magic to the stones themselves. Marin gasped, the first sound beyond that whispered name, and her body arched as the disruption sent shockwaves through whatever connection linked her to the ritual. Stop. Talia cried out. You're killing her. He's freeing her, another voice said. Damien glanced back to see one of the younger elders, Stellan, a man who'd always questioned the old ways, stepping forward. I'll help. Stellan, no, Corvin started. But Stellan was already moving into the circle, his own face twisting with pain as the wards fought him. He grabbed the chain on Marin's other wrist. Together, he and Damien pulled. The first chain broke with a sound like shattering crystal. Marin screamed. It was the first real sound she'd made, and it tore through the clearing with such raw anguish that even the most hardened elders flinched. Power erupted from her body, not the controlled siphoning of the ritual, but wild, uncontained magic that had been trapped for too long. Light blazed between the stones, and the earth itself trembled. The backlash, someone shouted. Damien didn't care. He reached for the next chain, the one around her throat, and this time when he pulled, 3 more elders rushed forward to help. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to show that even in darkness, some part of the pack still remembered honor. Together, they broke the chains. The moment the last chain shattered, Marin collapsed forward into Damien's arms. She weighed almost nothing. 5 years of the ritual had consumed her from the inside out, leaving her body fragile as bird bones wrapped in paper-thin skin. Damien caught her carefully, cradling her against his chest as magic exploded around them in waves of uncontrolled power. The stones cracked. The earth split beneath them in jagged lines that spider-webbed outward from the circle's center. And through it all, Maren shook like she was coming apart at the seams. "Get back!" Damien roared at the elders still standing too close. The power radiating from her was dangerous now, no longer bound by silver and ritual. It thrashed like a wounded animal, lashing out at anything nearby. One bolt of pure white energy struck a tree trunk, and the ancient pine exploded into splinters. Damien pulled Maren tighter against him, tucking her head beneath his chin, using his own body as a shield. His wolf surged forward, wrapping their mate in layers of alpha dominance and protection. Gradually, slowly, the wild magic began to recognize him, began to understand that he wasn't a threat. The explosions softened. The tremors eased. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the clearing fell silent except for the sound of Maren's ragged breathing against his neck. "Is she?" Stellan started. "Alive," Damien confirmed, though barely. He could feel her heart fluttering too fast, too weak. She needed healing. She needed rest. She needed 5 years of torture undone, and he didn't know if that was even possible. But she was breathing. She was free. And she was his. Corvin's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "You've just destroyed everything we built, my king. I hope she was worth it." Damien looked up at the elder, his eyes blazing gold. "Get out of my sight. All of you. Before I forget, you were once trusted advisors, and remember only that you're torturers who deserve execution." They fled. Even Corvin. Even the ones who'd helped break the chains. They disappeared into the forest, leaving Damien alone in the ruined clearing with the woman who'd paid the price for their prosperity. For a long time, he just held her. Let her shake. Let her breathe. Let her exist without anyone demanding something from her body or her magic. The moon broke through the canopy overhead, painting them both in silver light, and Damien found himself sending up a silent prayer to the goddess who'd bound their souls together. "Thank you for letting me find her in time." "Maren," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" A tiny nod against his chest. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe. Somewhere warm. Is that all right?" Another nod. But then her hand, thin fingers that trembled with effort, gripped the front of his shirt. When she looked up at him, her gray eyes were clearer than before. Still haunted. Still carrying oceans of pain. But present. Aware. "Why?" The word came out cracked and broken, barely recognizable as speech. Damien understood what she was asking. Why had he saved her? Why had he risked everything? Why had he chosen her over the pack's power? He brushed a strand of dark hair from her face, careful of the raw burns on her skin where the silver had rested. "Because you're mine. And I'm yours. The moon chose us for each other. That's not something I take lightly. You don't know me. Then we'll learn." He adjusted his grip, preparing to lift her. "But first, we get you healed. Everything else comes after." She didn't argue. Didn't have the strength to argue. But as Damien stood with her cradled against his chest, he felt her relax incrementally into his hold. The first tiny seed of trust. He carried her through the forest, moving swiftly despite her weight. His wolf guided him toward the main compound, but something made him hesitate. The pack would have questions. The elders would spread their version of events. And Maren, fragile, broken Maren, would be put on display before she'd had a chance to even remember what it felt like to be human. Instead, Damien veered toward the eastern edge of the territory. There was a cabin there, small and isolated, used occasionally by wolves who needed solitude. It would be warm. It would be safe. And most importantly, it would be private. As he walked, carrying his mate through the moonlit forest, Damien felt her begin to drift in and out of consciousness. Sometimes her breathing would even out, almost peaceful. Other times she'd jerk awake with a gasp, her body tensing as if expecting to find herself back in chains. Each time, he murmured reassurance. "You're safe. I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you anymore." He didn't know if she believed him. He wasn't sure he believed himself. The ritual was broken, but its effects would linger. And the pack would be furious when they realized what he'd done. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, he focused on getting Maren to shelter. The cabin appeared through the trees, exactly as he remembered it. Small but sturdy, with a stone fireplace and thick walls that would hold heat. Damien shouldered through the door and carried Maren inside, laying her carefully on the bed that dominated the single room. She looked impossibly small against the furs and blankets. Her white shift was torn and stained with blood where the silver had burned through to skin. The burns themselves were angry and raw, wrapping around her wrists and throat like cruel jewelry. Damien's hands shook as he reached for the shift's hem. "I need to see how bad the wounds are. Is that all right?" Maren's eyes found his. For a moment, he saw fear flicker there, not of him, but of vulnerability, of being exposed, of being helpless in front of someone who could hurt her. "I won't hurt you," Damien promised. "I'm just going to look. That's all. You can tell me to stop anytime." Slowly, she nodded. He worked carefully, easing the fabric away from her injuries. Each new burn he uncovered made his wolf snarl with rage. They'd done this to her. His pack. His elders. People he'd trusted with his life had done this to an innocent woman and called it necessary. But beneath the wounds, Damien saw something else. Scars. Old ones. Silver scars that crisscrossed her back and arms, layered over each other in patterns that spoke of years, decades maybe, of suffering. The ritual hadn't been her first torture. "Maren," he said quietly. "These scars, some of them are old. Much older than 5 years." She closed her eyes, turned her face away. "You don't have to tell me," Damien continued. "Not now. Not until you're ready. But I want you to know, whatever happened to you before, whoever hurt you, they'll never touch you again. You have my word on that." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. Then Maren's voice, barely above a whisper, fragile as spun glass. "I was born wrong." Damien stilled. Waited. "My pack, they said I carried cursed blood. Too much power. The kind that destroys everything it touches." Her words came slowly, painfully, like each one cost her. "When I was 12, my magic manifested. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. But during my first shift, silver fire came with it. It burned. Everything. My mother. My father. Half the pack house." Damien's chest tightened. "They tried to kill me," Maren continued, her voice flat now, emotionless. "Years of practiced detachment. Drove me into the mountains with silver chains and torches. But I survived. Learned to control it. Mostly. I thought if I stayed away from other wolves, if I lived alone, I couldn't hurt anyone else. But they found you anyway. 5 years ago. I was hunting near what I didn't know was pack territory. Your father's warriors caught me. Brought me to the elders." She opened her eyes, met his gaze. "They saw what I was. What I could do. And they decided I could be useful." The pieces fell into place. A rogue with ancient magic, no pack to protect her, already broken by trauma and guilt. Easy to control. Easy to use. Easy to convince that maybe this was her purpose, to suffer so others could thrive. "You're not cursed," Damien said fiercely. "You're not wrong. You're powerful, yes. Different. But that's not the same as being broken. I killed my parents. You were a child who couldn't control abilities no one taught you to manage. That's not your fault." Maren looked at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand. Like the concept of not being blamed for her own trauma was so foreign she couldn't process it. How many years had she carried that guilt? How many years had she believed she deserved every chain, every burn, every moment of agony? Damien reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and rested his hand over hers. I can't change what happened to you. I can't undo the past 5 years, or the 12 before that. But I can promise you this: from now on, you decide. You choose. Your power, your body, your life. It all belongs to you. No one else. Maren stared at their joined hands. A tear slipped down her cheek, the first he'd seen her shed. I don't know how to be anything but this, she whispered. Then we'll figure it out together. Damien squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to be anything right now except alive. That's enough. She didn't respond. But she didn't pull away either. And when Damien rose to build a fire in the hearth, when he found clean water and cloth to tend her wounds, when he wrapped her in warm blankets and promised to stay close while she slept, she let him. For the first time in 5 years, Maren closed her eyes without silver chains holding her down. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than pain. 3 days passed in the cabin before Maren could stand without trembling. Damien stayed with her through all of it. He fed her broth when she was strong enough to eat, changed her bandages when the silver burns wept and bled, sat beside her bed through the nightmares that came every time she closed her eyes, nightmares where she was back in the circle, back in chains, screaming into a void that swallowed her whole. Each time she woke gasping, he was there. Steady. Real. Reminding her that the chains were broken. On the 4th morning, Maren woke to find herself alone. Panic seized her chest. She sat up too quickly, her head spinning, her body protesting the sudden movement. But the cabin was empty. The fire had burned low. And Damien. I'm here. She spun toward the door to find him standing in the entrance, snow dusting his dark hair, his arms full of wood for the fire. Relief flooded through her so intensely it almost hurt. I wouldn't leave without telling you, Damien said gently, reading her expression. He kicked the door shut behind him and moved to rebuild the fire. Just getting supplies. The pack starting to ask questions about where their king disappeared to. Maren pulled the blanket tighter around herself. You should go back. They need you. They can wait. He didn't look at her as he worked, stacking logs with practiced efficiency. You're more important. I'm no one. You're my mate. Damien straightened, turning to face her fully. And you're someone who's been through hell and deserves time to heal. The pack will manage a few more days without me hovering over them. Maren wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him that she'd caused him enough trouble already, that he'd sacrificed enough for someone as broken as her. But the words wouldn't come. Because part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, was desperately grateful he was still here. Can you walk? Damien asked. She nodded slowly. Good. Because there's something I need to show you. If you're up for it. 20 minutes later, Maren found herself dressed in clothes Damien had brought from the pack house, simple wool pants and a thick sweater that dwarfed her frame. They fit poorly, but they were warm and clean, and they didn't smell like blood or silver. Damien led her out of the cabin and into the forest. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world blanketed in white silence. Every branch hung heavy with frost. Every breath misted in the cold air. Maren's legs shook with effort after only a few minutes of walking, but she pushed forward, stubborn pride keeping her upright. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere the elders never took you, Damien replied. Somewhere they probably didn't want you to see. They walked deeper into the territory, following paths Maren didn't recognize. The trees here were older, their trunks wider than 3 men standing side by side. The forest felt different too, not threatening, but reverent. Like they were entering sacred ground. Eventually, they emerged into another clearing. But this one wasn't carved by ritual magic or pack politics. This one was natural, ancient, shaped by time and the movement of the earth itself. At its center stood a massive stone altar. Not like the ritual circle. This was something else entirely. The stone was black as midnight, shot through with veins of silver that caught the light and threw it back in fractured patterns. Symbols covered every surface, not the harsh, geometric patterns of the ritual circle, but flowing script that seemed to move when Marin looked at it too long. She stopped at the clearing's edge, her breath catching. Power hummed from the altar, but it wasn't the hungry, consuming power of the ritual. This was older, cleaner. It felt like moonlight and running water and the moment before dawn when the world held its breath. "What is this place?" Marin whispered. "The Moon Shrine," Damien said. "The original sacred site of our territory. Before the pack house, before the councils and the politics, this is where our ancestors came to commune with the goddess, to ask for guidance, to honor the bonds she created." Marin took a tentative step forward. The moment her foot crossed into the clearing, warmth flooded through her body. Not the burning heat of silver, but something gentle and encompassing, like being wrapped in summer sunlight. The silver veins in the altar stone began to glow. Damien inhaled sharply behind her. Marin. But she was already moving, drawn forward by something she couldn't name. Her feet carried her across the snow-covered ground until she stood directly before the altar. This close, she could see that the symbols weren't just carved into the stone. They were alive, pulsing with soft light that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. She reached out without thinking, her fingertips brushing the altar's surface. The world exploded into light. Marin gasped as visions flooded her mind. Not her memories, but older ones. Ancient ones. She saw wolves running beneath a full moon, their fur blazing with silver fire. She saw a woman standing in this exact spot, her hands raised to the sky, power pouring from her in waves that made the earth sing. She saw battles fought with magic and tooth and claw. She saw a bloodline stretching back through centuries, carried by women who burned too bright, who loved too fiercely, who died too young. And she saw herself. Not as she was now, broken and scarred and hollow, but as she could be. Standing tall, silver fire wreathed around her arms like living things, her eyes blazing with power that didn't destroy but protected. Beside her stood a man with golden eyes and a crown of starlight. Damien. The vision shattered. Marin stumbled backward, gasping for air. Damien caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her waist, holding her steady. "What did you see?" he demanded, his voice urgent but not unkind. I can't," Marin struggled to find words for what had just happened. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. There were others. Like me. Women with fire in their blood. The silver flame bearers, a voice said. They both spun to find an old woman standing at the clearing's edge. She was ancient, her face creased with a lifetime of wrinkles, her white hair hanging in a single braid down her back. But her eyes were sharp and clear, and she looked at Marin with something like recognition. "Grandmother Sable," Damien said, surprise coloring his tone. "What are you doing here?" "Waiting for her, obviously." The old woman, Sable, moved into the clearing with surprising grace for someone who must have been well past 80. "Did you think I didn't know about the ritual? About what the council was doing?" Damien's expression hardened. "If you knew. I couldn't stop them. No more than you could have stopped them if you'd known sooner." Sable waved a dismissive hand. "The council has held power for too long, made themselves believe they alone understood the old ways. But they forgot the most important part." She stopped in front of Marin, studying her face. "They forgot that the old magic has a mind of its own. And it doesn't take kindly to being stolen." Marin found her voice. "Who are they?" "The women in my vision. Your ancestors." Sable reached out and took Marin's hand, turning it over to examine the scars on her wrist. "The silver flame has been passed down through your bloodline for 1,000 years. Always to the daughters. Always to the ones strong enough to carry it. Your mother had it. Her mother before her. All the way back to the first bearer, a woman named Lunara, who stood beside the moon goddess herself when the packs were formed. The name resonated in Marin's chest like a struck bell. Lenara. She'd heard that name before, whispered in her dreams, echoed in the spaces between heartbeats. But my mother died, Marin said. I killed her. The fire. Your mother died protecting you, Sable corrected firmly. When your fire manifested, she threw herself between you and your father's warriors. The flames consumed her because she chose to shield you with her own body. That was her choice, child. Not your fault. The words hit Marin like a physical blow. All these years, she'd believed she'd murdered her mother in a fit of uncontrolled rage. But if what Sable was saying was true, why didn't anyone tell me? The question came out broken. Because your pack wanted you to believe you were cursed, Sable said bluntly. A child who thinks she's a monster is easier to control than one who understands she's powerful. They drove you out not because you were dangerous, but because they were afraid of what you could become. Damien's arms tightened around Marin's waist. She leaned into him, needing the anchor as her entire understanding of herself shifted beneath her feet. The prophecy speaks of a silver flame-bearer who would stand at the end of an age, Sable continued, her gaze drifting to the glowing altar. One who would either burn the old world to ash or forge it anew. The council thought they could control that power, use it to fuel their ambitions. But the prophecy doesn't work that way. She looked back at Marin. You were never meant to be their tool. You were meant to be their reckoning. I don't want to be anyone's reckoning, Marin whispered. I just want to stop hurting. Sable's expression softened. I know, child. And you will. But first, you need to understand what you are. Not a curse. Not a mistake. You're the last daughter of the Silver Flame, and that means something. The magic in your blood is ancient and sacred. It was given to your line for a purpose. What purpose? To protect the innocent. To stand against tyrants. To burn away corruption wherever it takes root. Sable gestured to the altar. Your ancestors stood here and made oaths to the goddess. Promised to use their power not for conquest or glory, but for justice. That oath lives in you whether you spoke it or not. Marin looked at the altar, at the silver veins still glowing softly in response to her presence. She thought about the vision, the version of herself standing tall and unafraid, fire dancing in her palms like it was something beautiful instead of something to fear. Could she ever be that person? After everything she'd endured, everything she'd lost, could she transform her pain into purpose? I don't know how, she admitted. That's why you have him. Sable nodded toward Damien. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes when she binds mates. She gave you each other for a reason. He's your anchor. Your balance. The earth to your fire. Damien spoke for the first time since Sable had appeared. What happens now? The council won't accept this. They'll say she's too dangerous. That she needs to be controlled. Let them try. Sable's smile was sharp as a blade. The council's power was built on stolen magic. Without the ritual feeding them, they're just old wolves pretending at wisdom. But you're the Alpha King, boy. And she's your mate. Together, you're more than they ever were. She turned to leave, then paused at the clearing's edge. One more thing. The ritual may be broken, but its effects will linger. The pack's strength will wane over the next few weeks. There will be challenges. Tests. Those who benefited from the stolen power will fight to get it back. Her eyes found Marin's. And there are other forces in this world who would love to possess a silver flame-bearer. Stay close. Trust each other. And don't let anyone convince you that your power makes you less than human. Then she was gone, disappearing into the trees like smoke. Marin and Damien stood alone in the clearing, surrounded by snow and ancient magic and the weight of revelations that changed everything. 1,000 years, Marin said softly. My bloodline carried this for 1,000 years. And now it's yours, Damien replied. He turned her in his arms so she faced him fully. How do you feel? Marin considered the question. She felt terrified, overwhelmed, like she'd been handed a crown she never asked for and told to wear it with grace. But beneath all that, Less alone, she admitted. Knowing I'm not the first. That others before me carried this burden and survived it. You're not alone, Damien said firmly. You have me. And I'm not going anywhere. Maren looked up at him, this man who'd broken chains for her, who'd defied his entire council, who stood beside her now like he'd been waiting his whole life to find her. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger than before, fed by proximity and trust and the slow building foundation of something that might become love. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. Not the curse. Not the power. Just me. Damien cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his palms. I'll always see you, Maren. That's what mates do. And there, in the sacred clearing where her ancestors had stood, Maren let herself believe, for the first time in her life, that maybe she deserved to be seen. They returned to the cabin as the sun began its descent, painting the snow-covered forest in shades of amber and rose. Maren's legs ached from the walk, her body still weak from years of ritual drain, but something had shifted inside her. The altar's warmth lingered in her chest like a coal that wouldn't go cold. Damien kept close, his hand resting at the small of her back, not possessive, but protective. Grounding. Every few steps, she caught him glancing at her like he was afraid she might disappear if he looked away too long. They were 50 yards from the cabin when Damien suddenly stopped. His entire body went rigid. His nostrils flared, scenting the air, and a low growl rumbled in his chest that made Maren's wolf, dormant and weak as it was, stir in recognition of an alpha's warning. What is it? She whispered. We're not alone. Damien's eyes flashed gold. Stay behind me. But it was already too late. Figures emerged from the trees surrounding the cabin, not slowly, not sneaking, but with deliberate visibility. They wanted to be seen. Wanted to make a statement. Maren counted 7 of them, all wearing the dark leathers of the pack's elite guard. Warriors who answered directly to the council. At their center stood Corvin. The old elder looked different than he had in the ritual clearing. Then he'd worn ceremonial robes and carried the authority of tradition. Now, dressed in practical traveling clothes, his expression hard as granite, he looked less like a wise advisor and more like what he truly was, a man who'd wielded power for decades and had no intention of letting it go. My king, Corvin said, his tone carefully neutral. The pack has missed your presence. 3 days is a long time for an alpha to be absent. Damien didn't move. Didn't step forward or show any sign of submission. I had more important matters to attend to. More important than your people? Corvin's gaze slid to Maren, and something cold flickered in his eyes. Or have you been too distracted to remember your duties? Careful, Corvin. Damien's voice dropped an octave, threaded with alpha command. You're speaking about my mate. I'm speaking about the creature who's destroyed 5 years of carefully maintained power, Corvin snapped, his facade of respect cracking. The pack is already weakening. Patrols report our borders feel different, thinner somehow. The rival packs are noticing. We've had 3 incursions in as many days. Scouts testing our defenses. They smell blood in the water. Then strengthen the patrols. Post more guards. With what strength? Corvin took a step forward, and the warriors with him shifted, hands moving subtly toward weapons. The ritual wasn't just ceremony, boy. It was survival. Every ounce of power we drew from her went into protecting this territory, into making us strong enough that no one dared challenge us. You've taken that away. I freed an innocent woman from torture, Damien corrected. If our strength was built on her suffering, then we didn't deserve it. Noble words. Corvin's lip curled. But nobility won't protect our children when the Shadowfang pack comes howling through our borders. It won't save our elders when Ironwood decides we're weak enough to conquer. Your father understood this. He made the hard choices. My father was wrong. The words hung in the cold air like a challenge. Several of the warriors exchanged glances. This was dangerous territory, questioning a dead king's decisions. But Damien didn't back down. He was wrong to allow the ritual, Damien continued. Wrong to think power bought with innocent blood could ever lead to anything but corruption. And you're wrong to think I'll continue his mistakes. Corvin's expression hardened. Then you're not fit to be Alpha King. The statement fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples of implications spreading outward. This wasn't just disagreement. This was a direct challenge to Damien's authority. Marin felt Damien's muscles coil beneath her hand. Felt his wolf surge forward, ready for the fight. Corvin was clearly provoking. You want to challenge me, old man? Damien's voice was dangerously soft. You think you can take my crown? Not me. Corvin smiled, cold and calculated. But tradition allows for any pack member to challenge an alpha who's proven himself unfit to lead, who's put his personal desires above the safety of his people. No one in this pack could beat me in fair combat, and you know it. Perhaps. But that's not really the question, is it? Corvin's gaze slid back to Marin. The question is whether you'll risk pack cohesion, risk civil war, risk everything we've built for her. Because if you insist on keeping this cursed creature as your mate, there will be those who demand you choose her or the crown. Marin's breath caught. She could feel the trap closing around them. Corvin had played this perfectly, made it seem like Damien was the one being unreasonable, the one prioritizing selfish desire over pack welfare. She's not cursed, Damien growled. She's killed before. Her own parents. Half her birth pack. And now, indirectly, she's endangering all of us. Corvin spread his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. I understand the mate bond is powerful. But you're an alpha king before you're a mate. Your first duty is to the pack. Always. One of the warriors spoke up, a younger man Marin didn't recognize. Some of the families are already talking, my king. Wondering if the old ways were protecting us for good reason. Wondering if maybe the council knows best. The council tortured an innocent woman for 5 years, Damien shot back. The council kept us safe for 5 years, Corvin corrected. And now that safety is gone. Soon enough, the pack will have to decide, do they follow a king who gambled their lives on a stranger? Or do they look for new leadership? It wasn't quite a coup. Not yet. But the threat was clear. Corvin was rallying support, planting seeds of doubt, turning the pack against Damien's decision. And with the borders weakening, with rival packs circling, he had leverage. Fear could make people do terrible things. Marin knew that better than anyone. I won't give her up, Damien said flatly. And I won't give up my crown. So you'd better have a real challenge ready, Corvin, because I'm not stepping aside. We'll see. Corvin's smile never reached his eyes. The full moon is in 3 days. The pack gathers then, as tradition demands. Perhaps we should put it to them, ask our people who they trust to lead them through the coming storm. Their king or their council. That's not how succession works. It is when the alpha has lost the confidence of his people. Check the old laws, boy. Your father wrote them himself. Corvin turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. The pack has requested that your mate remain within the cabin until the full moon. For everyone's safety. Just a precaution, you understand. Given her history of uncontrolled power. She's not a prisoner. Of course not. Just a guest who's agreed to stay put. Unless she'd prefer to leave the territory entirely. Corvin looked at Marin directly for the first time, his gaze calculating. You could go. Walk away. Let the Alpha King keep his crown and his pack. It would be the noble thing to do, wouldn't it? Sacrifice yourself so others don't have to suffer. The words hit their mark perfectly. Marin flinched, because that was exactly what she'd been trained to believe, that her presence brought only pain, that the best thing she could do for people she cared about was disappear. Don't listen to him, Damien said sharply, sensing her instinct to flee. He's manipulating you. I'm offering her a choice, Corvin said mildly. Something your father's council never did. She can stay and watch this pack tear itself apart over her. Or she can leave and give everyone a chance at peace. What do you think she'll choose, my king? Then he was gone, melting back into the forest with his warriors, leaving behind nothing but boot prints in the snow and the poisonous weight of his words. Damien immediately turned to Marin, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders. Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't. He's right though, Marin said quietly. People are going to get hurt because of me. The pack is weakening. Rivals are circling. If you just what? Run away and let them win? Let Corvin prove that threatening you is an effective way to control me. Damien shook his head fiercely. That's not happening. I won't let them use you as a weapon against me. But if staying causes a civil war, then we fight a civil war. Damien's eyes blazed. I'm not choosing between you and the pack, Marin. You are part of this pack now. You're my mate. That makes you Luna, whether Corvin likes it or not. And any wolf who can't accept that can leave. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. He pulled her closer, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. I know what he's doing. I know he's trying to make you feel guilty, trying to trigger every instinct you have to protect others by harming yourself. But you're not responsible for the pack's weakness. The ritual was. The corruption was. Not you. Marin wanted to believe him. Desperately. But Corvin's words echoed in her head like a curse. How many people would suffer because Damien had chosen her? How many would die when the rival packs attacked a weakened territory? The full moon gathering, she said. What happens there? Damien pulled back slightly, his jaw tight. Traditionally, it's when the pack comes together to settle disputes, witness challenges, and reaffirm their bond with the Alpha. Corvin's going to use it as a platform to undermine me. He'll paint me as a king who abandoned his people for selfish reasons. And with the borders weak, with everyone afraid, they might listen. So we have 3 days. 3 days to what? Marin looked toward the forest where Corvin had disappeared. Silver fire flickered at the edges of her vision. Not real, not yet, but potential. The altar's warmth was still with her, and Grandmother Sable's words echoed in her mind. You were meant to be their reckoning. 3 days to prove I'm not a curse, Marin said slowly. 3 days to show the pack what I really am. What I can do if I'm not chained and bleeding. Marin, you can't fight this battle alone, Damien. They're using me against you, which means I need to become your strongest asset instead of your weakness. She met his gaze, and for the first time since he'd found her, there was steel beneath the fragility. The silver flame was meant to protect. That's what Sable said. So that's what I'll do. I'll protect this pack. Protect you. And show Corvin exactly what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. Damien stared at her, something like pride kindling in his eyes. You can barely stand for more than an hour. Your magic nearly killed you 3 days ago. How are you going to? I don't know yet, Marin admitted. But I'm done running. Done hiding. Done letting people make me into a victim. She straightened despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. You broke my chains. Now I need to break theirs. The ones they've wrapped around their own minds that say power stolen is power earned. For a long moment, Damien said nothing. Then slowly, deliberately, he dropped to one knee before her. The gesture shocked Marin, an Alpha King kneeling to anyone was unheard of. What are you doing? Pledging myself to you, Damien said simply. Not just as your mate. As your ally. Your partner. Whatever you need to heal, whatever you need to grow into your power, I'll provide it. And when the full moon comes, we'll face the pack together. As equals. Marin's throat tightened. 3 days ago, she'd been dying in chains, convinced she deserved every moment of suffering. Now a king knelt before her, offering not just protection but partnership. She reached down and took his hand, pulling him to his feet. Together, then. But you have to promise me something. Anything. If it comes down to choosing between me and the pack's survival, you choose the pack. Marin, promise me. Her grip tightened on his hand. I won't be the reason innocent people die. If protecting me means sacrificing others, then I'm not worth protecting. Promise me you'll make the right choice, even if it destroys us. Damien's expression was tortured. Every instinct, every fiber of the mate bond, screamed against making such a promise. But he saw the resolve in her eyes. Understood that this was important to her, that being worth saving meant not costing others their lives. "I promise," he said finally. "But it won't come to that. We'll find another way." 3 days to find it. 3 days, Damien agreed. They stood together in the snow-covered clearing, the cabin waiting behind them, the forest full of eyes watching from the shadows. Somewhere out there, Corvin was planning. Rival packs were gathering, and the full moon was rising. But for now, they had each other. And 3 days to change the fate of a pack that didn't yet understand what they'd awakened when they chained a silver flame bearer in their sacred circle. 3 days to turn a curse into salvation. Or die trying. That night, Maren couldn't sleep. She lay in the cabin's single bed, staring at the rough-hewn beams of the ceiling while Damien kept watch by the fire. He'd insisted she take the bed, had made himself comfortable on the floor with blankets and furs, close enough to reach her if she needed him, but far enough to give her space. The mate bond hummed between them, not demanding, not urgent, just present. A constant awareness of where he was, how he felt, the steady rhythm of his breathing in the quiet dark. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling through the trees like something alive and hunting. Every sound made Maren's heart race. Every shadow that flickered across the walls looked like figures approaching, like Corvin returning with more warriors, like the chains coming to wrap around her wrists again. "You're safe here," Damien said without turning from the fire. He'd sensed her fear through the bond, the way she couldn't seem to silence her racing thoughts. "I've set wards around the cabin. Old magic from before the council corrupted the rituals. Nothing gets through without me knowing." "How did you learn the old magic?" Maren asked, grateful for the distraction of conversation. "My grandmother. Not Sable, my mother's mother. She died when I was 15, but before that, she taught me everything the council tried to bury. Said the old ways were falling out of practice, replaced by shortcuts and stolen power." He finally turned to look at her, firelight casting shadows across his face. "She would have liked you. A cursed rogue who nearly cost you your crown? A woman strong enough to survive 5 years of torture and still have fire left in her eyes." Damien stood, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "Not touching her, but close. You reminded me of her a little. In the clearing, when you decided to fight instead of run. She had that same steel core beneath soft edges." Maren pulled herself into a sitting position, the blanket pooling around her waist. The silver burns on her wrists were healing slowly, the raw flesh beginning to knit together. But they'd scar. Everything scarred eventually. "Tell me about her," she said. "Your grandmother." Damien's expression softened with memory. "She was small. Barely reached my father's shoulder. But she had this presence, like she took up more space than her body allowed. She could silence a room full of arguing alphas with a single look." He smiled slightly. "My father was terrified of her. In the best way. Did she know about the ritual?" "I don't think so. She died before it started. But I think if she'd known, she would have burned the council to ash herself." Damien's jaw tightened. She believed power was meant to be earned through service, not stolen through suffering. That magic was a gift from the goddess, not a resource to exploit. The council didn't agree? The council believed in results over morality, in strength over honor. "And my father," Damien paused, choosing his words carefully. "My father was a good man in many ways. He loved the pack, protected our people. But he was afraid of weakness, afraid of the rival packs who'd grown too strong. So when the council came to him with their solution, with you, he convinced himself it was necessary. That one life was worth thousands." "Maybe he was right," Maren said quietly. "Don't." Damien's hand found hers, his fingers threading through her scarred ones. "Don't make excuses for what they did. There's no equation that makes torture acceptable. No math that balances out 5 years of agony against pack security. But people will die now. Because you freed me. People might die. That's not the same as definitely dying. And if they do, Damien's grip tightened. It won't be because I freed you. It'll be because the pack relied on stolen power instead of building real strength. Because the council took shortcuts instead of doing the hard work of actual protection. You're not responsible for their failures. Marin wanted to believe him. But guilt was a familiar weight, worn so long it felt like part of her bones. How do you do that? She asked. Stay so certain? I've spent my whole life being told I'm dangerous, destructive, that my very existence causes pain. And you just decide that's not true. Because I see you. Damien shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. I see who you are beneath the scars and the fear. I see the woman who survived hell and still has the capacity for kindness. Who worries about people who tortured her? Who's willing to face down an entire pack to protect a man she barely knows? His golden eyes held hers. That's not a curse, Marin. That's someone worth knowing. Worth keeping. Her breath caught. The mate bond flared between them, responding to the emotion in his words, the sincerity bleeding through every syllable. She could feel his truth through the connection. He meant every word. Not because he was supposed to as her mate, but because he genuinely saw value in her that she'd never been taught to see in herself. I don't know how to be that person, she whispered. The one you see. I only know how to survive. How to endure. Then I'll teach you the rest. Damien leaned forward until their foreheads touched, his breath warm against her lips. We'll figure it out together. One day at a time. One moment at a time. You don't have to be whole or healed or perfect. You just have to be willing to try. And if I fail? If the silver flame burns out of control again? If I hurt someone? Then we deal with it. Together. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. You're not alone anymore, Marin. I know that's hard to believe after so many years of being abandoned and isolated. But I'm here. I'm staying. And nothing you do, no mistake, no loss of control, no moment of weakness, will make me leave. Tears burned at the corners of Marin's eyes. When was the last time someone had made her a promise like that? When was the last time anyone had looked at her and seen something other than a problem to be solved or a weapon to be wielded? Why? The question came out broken. Why would you risk everything for me? You barely know me. I know enough. Damien's voice was firm, absolute. I know you're brave. I know you're stronger than anyone who's never been broken could understand. I know your first instinct is to protect others even when it costs you everything. He paused, his expression shifting into something vulnerable. And I know that when I found you in that circle, when the mate bond snapped into place, something in my chest clicked home. Like I'd been walking around with a missing piece my whole life and suddenly found it. The mate bond is more than just instinct, Damien interrupted. Yes, it makes me want to protect you. Want to keep you close. But that's not why I'm choosing you. I'm choosing you because in 3 days, you've shown me more courage, more integrity, more genuine goodness than most wolves show in a lifetime. Because when Corvin offered you an escape, offered you a chance to run and save yourself, your first thought was about protecting me and the pack. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. That's who you are, Marin. And that's why I'm not letting you go. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotion. The fire crackled. The wind howled. And between them, the mate bond pulsed with warmth that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with two broken people finding something real in each other. Can I ask you something? Marin said finally. Anything. What happens after? After the full moon, after we face the pack, assuming we survive, what then? Do I just stay in this cabin? Hide away so I don't cause problems? Damien's expression hardened. You're not hiding anywhere. You'll stand beside me as Luna. You'll have a voice in pack decisions. A place in the community. They'll never accept me. Some won't. At first. But others will see what I see, that you're exactly the kind of leader we need. Someone who understands suffering. Someone who won't tolerate cruelty or abuse of power. Someone who will fight for the weakest among us because she knows what it's like to be abandoned. You have a lot of faith in someone who can barely walk without shaking. You're healing. And when you're strong again, Damien's smile turned almost predatory, proud. You're going to be magnificent. The silver flame isn't a curse. It's a gift. And when you learn to wield it properly, when you step into the power you were always meant to have, this pack won't know what hit them. Maren found herself smiling despite everything. Despite the fear and the uncertainty and the enormous weight of the coming confrontation. Because Damien believed in her. Not blindly, not foolishly, but with clear eyes and understanding of exactly who she was, scars and all. Tell me something true, she said suddenly. Something you don't tell anyone else. Damien considered for a moment. Then, I'm terrified. The admission surprised her. Of what? Of failing you. Of not being strong enough to protect you from what's coming. Of losing you after just finding you. His voice dropped lower, more raw. I've been Alpha King for 2 years. I'm supposed to have all the answers, supposed to lead with certainty. But with you, with us, I feel like I'm walking blind. Making choices that could destroy everything. And I'm scared that one wrong move will cost you your life. The vulnerability in his confession made Maren's chest ache. She reached up, mirroring his earlier gesture by cupping his face in her palm. Then we're both terrified. Both walking blind. Both hoping we're strong enough for what comes next. At least we're doing it together. Together, Maren agreed. And then, without planning it, without overthinking the consequences, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first. Tentative. A question more than a demand. But Damien responded immediately, his lips moving against hers with gentle urgency, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The mate bond ignited between them like lightning, sending waves of warmth and connection cascading through Maren's body. She gasped against his mouth, overwhelmed by sensation, by the feeling of being truly touched for the first time in years without pain accompanying it. Damien pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers, both of them breathing hard. Are you sure? He murmured. We don't have to, I don't want to push. I'm sure. Maren's hands fisted in his shirt, holding him close. I need this. Need to remember what it feels like to be touched with kindness instead of cruelty. Need to know this is real and not just another dream I'll wake from back in chains. It's real, Damien promised. I'm real. This is real. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, pouring everything he couldn't say into the connection of lips and breath and tangled heartbeats. His hands were careful on her body, mindful of healing wounds, but there was hunger beneath the gentleness. The need of a mate too long denied, tempered by respect for her trauma and her pace. Maren let herself get lost in it, in the warmth of his body against hers. In the way his fingers traced patterns on her skin that wrote promises in a language older than words. In the mate bond that sang between them, growing stronger with every touch, every kiss, every moment of trust freely given. They didn't go further than kissing. Not that night. But it was enough. More than enough. Because for the first time in 5 years, Maren felt human again. Felt wanted not for what could be taken from her, but for who she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien pressed one more soft kiss to her forehead. Sleep now. I'll keep watch. Stay with me, Maren asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Not, we don't have to, just. Don't want to be alone. Never alone, Damien promised. He lay down beside her, pulling her against his chest, one arm wrapped securely around her waist. I've got you. Maren tucked her head beneath his chin, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. The mate bond settled into something warm and constant, a presence that pushed back against the nightmares waiting in the dark. And for the first time since she could remember, Maren fell asleep feeling safe. Outside, the wind continued to howl. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days until everything would either fall apart or come together in ways neither of them could predict. But tonight, in the warmth of the cabin, wrapped in the arms of a king who'd chosen her over everything, Maren let herself hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than a curse. Hope that together, they might be unstoppable. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and growing tension. Damien spent hours teaching Maren to access her magic without fear, not the wild, uncontrolled explosions that had marked her childhood, but deliberate, focused power. They practiced in the clearing near the cabin, far from curious eyes, where she could let the silver flame flicker to life without worrying about hurting anyone. It was harder than she'd expected. Years of suppression had taught her body to lock the power down, to cage it so tightly that releasing it felt like tearing herself open. Every time she tried to summon the flame, phantom pain lanced through her wrists where the silver chains had burned, and her magic stuttered and died. "Stop fighting yourself," Damien said on the second afternoon, watching her struggle. "You're treating your power like an enemy. Like something that needs to be controlled before it destroys everything." "Because that's what it does," Maren snapped, frustration bleeding through. She'd been trying for an hour to manifest even a spark, and all she had to show for it was a headache and trembling hands. "Every time I've used it, people have died. Every time you've used it, you were either untrained or being tortured. That's not the same as the power itself being destructive." Damien moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Close your eyes. Feel the magic inside you, not as something separate, but as part of who you are. It's not foreign. It's not a curse. It's yours." Maren did as he asked, letting her eyes fall shut. She reached inward, past the fear and the trauma, searching for the core of power that lived in her chest. It was there, she could feel it. A ball of silver fire that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, warm and alive and waiting. But the moment she tried to draw on it, panic seized her. Images flashed through her mind, her mother's burning body, the pack house in flames, the ritual circle draining her drop by drop. Every memory screamed the same message: your power kills everything it touches. The flame sputtered and died before it could even reach her fingertips. "I can't," Maren whispered, opening her eyes. "It's too strong. Too dangerous. It's not too anything. You are exactly as powerful as you're meant to be." Damien turned her to face him, his expression intense. "The problem isn't your magic. It's that everyone in your life taught you to fear it, to see it as something wrong. But what if it's not? What if the silver flame chose your bloodline because you're strong enough to carry it? Because you're meant to wield that kind of power? And what if I'm not? What if I lose control at the full moon gathering and hurt innocent people? Children?" "Then I'll stop you," Damien said simply. "But I don't think that's going to happen. Because you're not that scared 12-year-old anymore. You're not powerless or untrained. You're a woman who survived 5 years of ritual torture and came out the other side, still capable of compassion. That takes more strength than any magic could give you." Maren wanted to believe him. Desperately. But doubt was a poison she'd swallowed for too long. It had seeped into her bones, into her very sense of self. "What if Corvin's right?" she asked quietly. "What if I am too dangerous to exist free? Then Corvin can face the consequences of being wrong." Damien's smile was sharp. "Because you're not going anywhere. And at the full moon, we're going to show the entire pack exactly what a silver flame bearer can do when she's not being drained and tortured. We're going to show them power used for protection instead of domination. And if they don't accept it, then they'll learn to." That night, as Maren lay awake listening to Damien's breathing in the darkness, she tried to imagine it. Standing before the pack, letting the silver flame burn without fear. Being seen not as a curse, but as something valuable. The image wouldn't come into focus. Every time she tried to picture it, her mind showed her chains instead. Showed her the pack turning away, rejecting her, demanding Damien choose between his mate and his crown. She was so lost in dark thoughts that she almost missed the sound. Footsteps. Soft and deliberate. Approaching the cabin. Marin sat up slowly, careful not to wake Damien. His wards should have alerted him to any intrusion, but nothing had triggered. Which meant either the wards had failed, or whoever was approaching knew how to bypass them. She slipped from the bed, moving silently to the window. The moon was nearly full now, its light turning the snow-covered forest into a landscape of silver and shadow. And there, emerging from the trees, was a figure in a dark cloak. Not Corvin. Too small, too feminine in movement. The figure reached the cabin door and knocked 3 soft taps that somehow felt like a signal. Marin debated waking Damien. But something about the visitor's body language didn't read as threatening. And if she was going to stop being helpless, stop relying on others to protect her, she needed to start making her own decisions. She opened the door. Talia stood on the threshold, her hood pushed back to reveal a face lined with worry. The younger elder who'd spoken up during the ritual, who'd seemed reluctant about the council's methods. Up close, Marin could see she was younger than she'd first appeared, maybe 40, though her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. "May I come in?" Talia asked quietly. "I need to speak with you." Alone. Every instinct screamed trap. But Marin stepped aside anyway, letting the elder enter. Behind her, she heard Damien stir, waking at the sound of voices. "Talia," he said, his voice rough with sleep and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" "Trying to save your mate's life," Talia replied. She looked at Marin with something that might have been sympathy. "And possibly your crown. Though I'm not sure either can be saved at this point." Damien was on his feet now, positioning himself between Talia and Marin. "Speak plainly. What's happened?" Talia pulled a folded piece of parchment from her cloak and held it out. "Corvin's made his move. He's called a formal challenge for tomorrow night, the full moon. But it's not a physical challenge. He's invoking the right of judgment." Marin saw Damien's face go pale. "That's not possible. The right hasn't been used in over a century, which is why most of the pack doesn't remember what it entails. Corvin's been very clever about it. He's framing it as ancient tradition, as the proper way to settle disputes when an alpha's judgment is questioned." Talia's expression was grim. "The pack council will present their case against you, against both of you. They'll argue that Damien has been compromised by the mate bond, that his decision to free Marin has endangered everyone." "And then?" "Then what?" Marin asked, though she already knew she wasn't going to like the answer. "Then the pack votes. On whether Damien remains Alpha King. And on whether you're allowed to live." The words fell like stones into water, sending ripples of horror spreading through the cabin. Marin's breath caught. They were going to put her life to a vote. Put Damien's crown to a vote. Turn it into a public spectacle where the pack could decide their fates like they were deciding what to have for dinner. "They can't do that," Damien said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They can if enough of the council agrees. And Corvin's been working the pack for days now, planting fear and doubt. Reminding everyone how strong they were with the ritual. How weak they've become since it ended. How the borders are failing." Talia's gaze flicked to Marin. "He's made you into a symbol of everything wrong with Damien's rule. The dangerous outsider who's corrupted their king's judgment. The curse that's going to get them all killed. So what do we do?" Damien demanded. "How do we fight this?" "I don't know if you can." Talia's voice was heavy with defeat. Corvin stacked the deck too perfectly. The pack is afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things. They want someone to blame for the weakness, for the vulnerability. And you've given them a perfect target. She looked at Marin. "I'm sorry. Truly. I didn't agree with the ritual. I argued against it. But I was outvoted, and I wasn't strong enough to stop it alone. And now Now you're here to tell us we've already lost, Marin finished. I'm here to give you a choice, Talia corrected. There's a way out. A loophole in the right of judgment. If the accused voluntarily leaves the territory before the trial begins, the right is nullified. The pack can't vote on something that's no longer their problem. Understanding crashed over Marin like ice water. You want me to run? I want you to survive, Talia said. If you go through with this trial, Corvin will make sure the vote goes his way. He'll paint you as a monster. Show them the bodies from your past, the destruction you've caused. And the pack, terrified and weakened, will choose to execute you. They'll see it as cutting out a cancer before it spreads. And Damien will lose his crown for defying the pack's judgment. Corvin will take over as alpha or install someone he can control. Either way, everything Damien's trying to build, a pack based on honor instead of stolen power, dies with your trial. The room fell silent except for the crackling fire. Marin could feel Damien's eyes on her, could sense his rising panic through the mate bond. He knew what she was thinking. Knew that every instinct she had was screaming at her to sacrifice herself to save him. No, Damien said flatly. Absolutely not. We're not running. We're not giving them what they want. What they want is for this to be over, Talia said. One way or another. And if Marin stays, it ends with her death and your exile. If she leaves. If I leave, Corvin wins, Marin interrupted. He proves that threatening me is an effective way to control Damien. He sets a precedent that the Alpha King can be manipulated through his mate. And every future leader will know they're vulnerable to the same tactics. Talia blinked, surprised. You've thought about this. I've spent 5 years being used as a tool. I know how these games work. Marin's voice was steadier than she felt. This isn't really about me being dangerous. It's about power. About who controls the pack. Corvin wants his authority back, and I'm just the excuse he's using to get it. Exactly, Damien said, relief flooding his features. Which is why we stay and fight. With what? Talia challenged. Corvin has the council, has the fear of the pack on his side, has framed this perfectly so you look like the villain. What could you possibly present at the trial that would change their minds? Marin looked at Damien. At this man who'd broken chains for her, who'd risked everything to save someone everyone else had written off as expendable. The mate bond hummed between them, and through it she felt his absolute conviction. He would fight for her until his last breath, would burn the world before letting them take her. But conviction wasn't enough. Not against Corvin's calculated manipulation. I don't know yet, Marin admitted. But running isn't the answer. If I leave, I'm proving them right. Proving I'm too dangerous, too cursed, too much of a problem to exist in civilized society. And I'm done doing that. Done letting other people define who I am. Even if it costs you your life? Even then. Marin's hands clenched into fists. Because some things are worth dying for. And being seen, truly seen for who I am instead of what they've made me, is one of them. Talia studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, something shifted in her expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of a kind of courage the elder hadn't expected from someone so broken. There might be one thing, Talia said carefully. Something that could shift the narrative. But it's dangerous. And it requires you to trust me. Why should we? Damien asked. You were part of the ritual. Part of the council that tortured her. Because I'm tired of being complicit in cruelty, Talia said simply. Because I've watched Corvin consolidate power for years, watched him twist the old ways into justification for increasingly horrible acts, and I've been too afraid to stand against him. But you, she looked at Marin, you stood against 5 years of torture and didn't break. If you can be that brave, I can at least try. What's your plan? Marin asked. Talia glanced at the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then she leaned in close, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The right of judgment allows for a champion. Someone to speak on behalf of the accused. to present evidence and testimony that might sway the pack's vote. She paused. It's traditionally someone from the pack, someone respected. But the old laws don't actually specify that. Just someone who the accused trusts to represent them truthfully. And you're volunteering? Damien's skepticism was clear. No. I'm too tainted by association with the council. The pack wouldn't listen to me. Talia's eyes met Marin's. But there's someone they would listen to. Someone who knows the truth about the silver flame bearers, about the prophecy, about what Marin truly represents. Sable, Marin breathed. Grandmother Sable, Talia confirmed. If she stands as your champion, if she testifies to your bloodline's purpose and your power's true nature, the pack might question Corvin's narrative. It's not guaranteed, but it's a chance. Will she do it? Damien asked. I don't know. She's remained neutral for years, refused to take sides in pack politics. But Talia looked at Marin again. She came to you at the Moon Shrine. She told you who you were. Maybe that means she's finally ready to act. It was a thin thread of hope. Barely anything at all. But it was more than they'd had a moment ago. How do we reach her? Marin asked. I can carry a message. But it needs to be from you. Something that will convince her you're worth the risk of opposing Corvin. Talia pulled out another piece of parchment and a small stick of charcoal. Write to her. Tell her why you're staying. Why this fight matters. And pray to the goddess she agrees to help. Marin took the parchment with shaking hands. What could she possibly say that would convince an ancient elder to stand against the council? What words could capture everything that was at stake? She looked at Damien. At the man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay anyway. At the king who'd put her life above his crown. At her mate, her partner, her anchor in a world that had always been hostile. And then she began to write. Not with flowery language or careful political maneuvering. Just the truth. Raw and simple and real. When she was done, she folded the parchment and handed it to Talia. Will this be enough? I don't know, Talia admitted. But it's honest. And sometimes that's all we have. The elder left as quietly as she'd come, disappearing into the forest with Marin's letter clutched in her hand. The cabin felt emptier after she'd gone, the walls closing in with the weight of tomorrow's trial. Damien pulled Marin into his arms, holding her like he could shield her from what was coming through sheer force of will. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Together, Marin agreed. But as she stood there in the circle of his embrace, feeling the mate bond pulse with fear and determination and desperate hope, Marin couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow night would change everything. One way or another, the trial would end with blood. She just prayed it wouldn't be hers. The full moon rose over the packlands like a judge taking the bench. Marin stood at the edge of the gathering grounds, watching hundreds of wolves filter in from every corner of the territory. They came in family groups, clusters of friends, solitary figures drawn by curiosity or duty. The air thrummed with tension and unspoken questions. Everyone knew what tonight was. Everyone had chosen a side, whether they admitted it or not. The gathering grounds were ancient, a natural amphitheater carved into the hillside, with terrace levels of stone where pack members could sit and observe. At the lowest point, where the moonlight pooled brightest, stood a raised platform of black rock. The judgment seat, where those being tried would stand before their people and face whatever verdict came. Damien stood beside her, dressed in the formal leathers of an alpha king dark as midnight, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. He looked every inch the ruler. Powerful. Commanding. But Marin could feel his fear bleeding through the mate bond like an open wound. You don't have to do this, he said for the 100th time. We can still leave. Take our chances in neutral territory. And spend the rest of our lives running? Marin shook her head. She'd dressed simply, the plainest clothes Damien had brought from the pack house, deliberately unadorned. She wanted them to see her as she was. Not threatening. Not trying to seem more than human. Just a woman asking to be judged fairly. No. This ends tonight. One way or another. A horn sounded low and resonant, calling the pack to order. The murmur of conversation died as all eyes turned toward the platform. Corvin emerged from the crowd, flanked by 6 other elders. He wore ceremonial robes the color of dried blood, and his expression was carved from stone. By the ancient laws, Corvin's voice carried across the grounds without shouting, "I call this rite of judgment to order. We gather beneath the full moon to determine the fate of our Alpha King, Damian Blackwood, and the rogue known as Marin, who claims to be his mate." Claims. Not is. Already Corvin was planting doubt, making their bond seem questionable. The charges, Corvin continued, are as follows: that Alpha Damian Blackwood has prioritized personal desire over pack safety. That he destroyed a ritual which protected this territory for 5 years, leaving us vulnerable to attack. That he harbors a dangerous rogue with a history of destruction and death. And that his judgment has been compromised to the point where he can no longer lead effectively. Each charge fell like a hammer blow. Around the amphitheater, heads nodded. Whispers spread. Marin could see the fear in their faces, could practically smell the anxiety rolling off the crowd in waves. "The accused may approach," Corvin said, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Damian took Marin's hand, squeezing once. Then together they walked down the stone steps to the platform. Every eye tracked their movement. Every breath seemed to hold as they took their positions at the judgment seat's center. "Who speaks for the accused?" Corvin asked, following the ritual formula. Silence. Marin's heart sank. Talia had promised to find Sable, to convince her to serve as champion. But the clearing was empty except for the elders and the watching pack. Had Sable refused? Or had Corvin gotten to her first, convinced her to stay neutral? No one. Corvin's smile was predatory. Then by default, the council's testimony will stand unchallenged, and we may proceed directly to, "I speak for them." The voice came from the back of the amphitheater, strong and clear despite its age. The crowd parted like water as Grandmother Sable made her way down the steps. She moved slowly but with absolute dignity, her white braid hanging over one shoulder, her simple dress somehow more impressive than Corvin's elaborate robes. Relief flooded through Marin so intensely her knees nearly buckled. Damian's grip on her hand tightened, the only sign of his own overwhelming gratitude. Sable reached the platform and turned to face the pack. "I am Sable Moonwhisper, eldest of this pack, keeper of the old ways. I claim the right of champion for Marin and Alpha Damian Blackwood." Corvin's expression darkened. "You've remained neutral in pack politics for 30 years. Why break that now, old woman?" "Because 30 years ago, I made the mistake of staying silent when I should have spoken," Sable replied. "I watched the council twist our traditions into justifications for cruelty. Watched them convince good wolves that torture was necessary for survival. I thought if I stayed out of it, if I preserved the ancient knowledge without interfering, I was honoring my role as elder." Her voice hardened. "I was wrong. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. And I will not make that mistake again." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sable had respect, decades of it, earned through wisdom and impartial counsel. Her choosing a side was significant. "Very well," Corvin said tightly. "Let the trial begin. I will present the council's case first." What followed was masterful and horrifying. Corvin painted a picture of Marin as a walking catastrophe, dredging up every detail of her past he could find. He told the pack about her parents' deaths, about the pack house that burned, about the uncontrolled magic that killed indiscriminately. He made it sound like everywhere she went, destruction followed. Then he pivoted to the ritual. Explained how it had kept them safe, made them strong, protected them from enemies. Conveniently left out the part where it required torturing an innocent woman. Made it sound like they'd simply been harnessing wild magic that would have been dangerous anyway. And now, Corvin said, building to his conclusion, our borders fail. Our strength wanes. Rival packs circle like sharks scenting blood in the water. All because one man, he gestured at Damien, decided his personal desires mattered more than the safety of hundreds. Decided one rogue woman was worth sacrificing everything we've built. He let that sink in. Let the fear work its way through the crowd. I propose, Corvin continued, that we show mercy. Let the Alpha King step down peacefully. Let him keep his life, but surrender his crown to leadership that will prioritize pack survival. And let the rogue leave our territory, alive, unharmed, free to find her fate elsewhere. We need not be cruel. We need only be practical. It was a clever offer. Made him seem reasonable, merciful even. And it gave the pack an easy out. They wouldn't have to vote for execution, wouldn't have to live with that guilt. They could just send Marin away. Problem solved. Marin felt the crowd shifting, considering. This was what Corvin had counted on, that given an option that seemed kind, seemed practical, people would take it rather than fight for something harder and messier. Grandmother Sable, Corvin said, turning to the elder. You may present your defense. Sable stepped forward, and for a moment she simply looked at the assembled pack. Her gaze swept across every face, young and old, carrying weight of years and memory. You're afraid, she said finally. I understand. The borders are weak. Enemies gather. You want someone to blame, someone to punish, some action that will make you feel safe again. She paused. But what Corvin offers you isn't safety. It's the same poison that's been killing this pack slowly for 5 years. We were stronger with the ritual, someone called from the crowd. You were stronger with stolen power, Sable corrected. There's a difference. Strength built on suffering is hollow. It may work for a time, but it rots from within. It teaches you that cruelty is acceptable if the results are convenient. That some lives matter less than others. That torture is justified if enough people benefit. She gestured to Marin. This woman is a silver flame-bearer. The last of a bloodline that has served the wolf packs for 1,000 years. Her ancestors stood beside alphas, protected the innocent, burned away corruption wherever they found it. They were honored, revered, treated as sacred gifts from the moon goddess herself. They were also dangerous, Corvin interjected. The old stories tell of silver flame-bearers who destroyed entire packs when they lost control. The old stories also tell of silver flame-bearers who saved entire packs from destruction, Sable shot back. Power is neutral. It's the wielder's intent and training that determines whether it protects or destroys. Marin was never trained, never taught to control her gift. Instead, she was punished for it, driven out. And when you found her, instead of offering guidance, you chained her and bled her for your own gain. We did what was necessary. You did what was easy. Sable's voice cracked like thunder. Training her would have been hard. Building real strength through preparation and unity would have been hard. But torturing one powerless woman? That was easy. Convenient. And you convinced yourselves it was noble because the alternative would have required actual sacrifice from those in power. The crowd stirred. Some faces showed shame, others anger. But people were listening. Now Corvin offers you the same easy path again, Sable continued. Send her away. Don't deal with the complexity of integration or healing or actually building a better pack. Just exile the problem and hope it doesn't come back to haunt you. She shook her head. But easy choices now lead to hard consequences later. And if you choose fear over courage tonight, you'll regret it. Pretty words, Corvin said coldly. But they don't change facts. The rogue is dangerous. The alpha is compromised. And we need leadership that will make hard choices. Then let me make one. The voice was Marin's. She'd been silent through the whole trial, letting others speak for her, but suddenly she couldn't bear it anymore. Couldn't stand there like a passive victim waiting for others to decide her fate. She stepped forward, pulling free from Damien's hand. You want to know if I'm dangerous? Marin's voice rang across the amphitheater. Yes, I am. I carry power that could level this entire gathering if I lost control. I've killed before, not on purpose, not with malice, but the bodies are still buried and the guilt is still mine to carry. She could see Corvin's satisfaction. She was confirming his narrative. But here's what he's not telling you, Marin continued. That power? It was meant to protect you. All of you. The silver flame doesn't choose bearers at random. It chooses women who have the strength to wield it responsibly. Women who understand suffering well enough that they'll never inflict it casually. Women who will burn themselves to ash before they let innocence come to harm. She turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as she could. I spent 5 years in chains so you could feel strong. 5 years bleeding so your borders would hold. And I would have died there, silently, believing I deserved it, except one man decided I was worth more than convenience. One man looked at me and saw a person instead of a resource. Her gaze found Damien. That's the kind of alpha you have. One who will risk everything, his crown, his life, his pack's approval, to do what's right instead of what's easy. And you're seriously considering replacing him with people who think torture is an acceptable leadership strategy. Because he's weak, Corvin spat. Compromised by the mate bond. The mate bond doesn't make him weak, Marin interrupted. It makes him accountable. Makes him understand that every decision affects real people with real lives. Makes him remember that power without compassion is just tyranny with better marketing. She took a breath, steadying herself. You can vote to exile me. You can vote to strip Damien of his crown. You can choose the easy path and hope everything works out. But you'll be choosing fear over integrity. Convenience over courage. And in 10 years, when your children ask why the pack stands for nothing, why your borders are defended by cruelty instead of strength, you'll have to explain that you had a chance to be better, and you chose comfort instead. Silence fell over the amphitheater. Marin could feel hundreds of eyes on her, weighing her words, measuring her sincerity. Then the attack came. It happened so fast that later, Marin could never quite piece together the sequence. One moment she was standing on the platform, the next moment something slammed into her from behind, claws raking across her back, teeth snapping at her throat. Damien roared, shifting mid-leap, his wolf form massive and golden-eyed. But there were more attackers, wolves in the crowd who'd been waiting for this moment, who'd been planted by Corvin to create chaos if the vote wasn't going his way. Marin hit the ground hard, pain exploding across her shoulders where claws had torn through cloth and flesh. Her attacker, a huge brown wolf with scarred muzzles, lunged for her throat again, and pure instinct took over. The silver flame erupted. Not controlled. Not careful. Pure defensive power that detonated outward in a wave of white-hot fire. Her attacker flew backward with a yelp for singed. 3 other wolves who'd been closing and scattered, yelping as flames licked at their paws. Marin scrambled to her feet, silver fire wreathing her arms like living serpents. Around her, the pack had devolved into chaos, some wolves shifting to fight the attackers, others fleeing, still others frozen in terror at the display of raw power. Enough. Damien's alpha command crashed over the gathering like a physical force. Wolves stopped mid-movement, compelled by the weight of his dominance. Everyone stand down. Now. Slowly, reluctantly, the chaos subsided. The attacking wolves, 4 of them, stood trapped between Damien's command and Marin's flames, unable to advance or retreat. Corvin stepped forward, and his expression was no longer confident. It was calculating. Adjusting. You see, he said to the crowd. This is what I warned you about. Uncontrolled power. Dangerous. Those wolves attacked her on your signal, Sable interrupted. Don't pretend this was spontaneous. You planned this. Staged an attack to make her lose control in front of everyone. She proved my point regardless, Corvin shot back. Look at her. She's one moment of fear away from burning us all. Marin looked down at her hands. Silver fire still danced across her skin, beautiful and terrible. The crowd was watching her with naked fear now, and she could feel her control slipping. Could feel the power wanting to expand, to protect, to destroy anything that might threaten her. This was it. The moment that would define everything. She could let the fear win, let the power rage out of control, prove every terrible thing they believed about her. Or she could choose. Maren closed her eyes, reached deep inside herself, past the panic and the pain, to the core of power that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She thought of Damien's words, "It's not foreign. It's yours." She thought of Sable's testimony about her ancestors, about women who'd carried this power with honor. She thought of the vision at the moon shrine, herself standing tall, flames controlled, protecting instead of destroying. And slowly, deliberately, she pulled the fire back in. It fought her, wanted to burn. But she was stronger than her fear now, stronger than her trauma. The silver flame retreated, dimming from blazing inferno to gentle glow to nothing at all. Her hands returned to normal human flesh. When she opened her eyes, the entire pack was staring at her in stunned silence. "I am not your curse," Maren said quietly. "I am not your sacrifice. I am a woman with power I didn't ask for and a past I can't change. But I am choosing right now, in front of all of you, to use that power to protect instead of destroy. To stand with you instead of against you. To be part of this pack if you'll have me." She turned to Corvin. "You wanted me to lose control. To prove I'm the monster you've made me out to be. But I'm not. And deep down, you know that. This was never about safety. It was about you maintaining power by keeping everyone afraid." "The vote," Corvin said through gritted teeth. "We proceed to the vote." "Yes," Sable agreed. "Let the pack decide. But let them decide based on truth, not fear and manipulation." The horn sounded again. Time for judgment. All those in favor of exiling Maren and removing Alpha Damien from his position, Corvin called out, "Stand to the right." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then slowly, figures began to rise. Older wolves mostly, ones who'd benefited from the ritual's power. A handful of younger ones who were too afraid to choose differently. Maren counted maybe 80 out of the several hundred gathered. All those opposed, Corvin continued, his voice tight, "Stand to the left." More movement. Families shifting, groups forming. Warriors who'd seen Maren control her power when she could have let it destroy. Young wolves who were tired of fear-based leadership. Mothers who'd watched the trial and seen a woman fighting for her right to exist. When everyone had chosen, the divide was clear. Maybe 2/3 of the pack stood on the left. In favor of Maren and Damien. Against exile. Corvin's face went through several expressions: shock, rage, calculation. The vote is corrupted. They're voting based on spectacle, not reason. They're voting based on courage instead of fear, Sable interrupted. Which is more than you've shown in years. This isn't over, Corvin snarled. It is, Damien said, stepping forward. His voice carried absolute authority. The pack has spoken. I remain Alpha King. Maren is recognized as Luna. And you, he looked at Corvin and the elders who'd supported him, you're removed from the council, effective immediately. Your crimes will be reviewed, and if I find you had anything to do with staging that attack, you'll answer for attempted murder. You can't. I absolutely can. I'm the Alpha King. Try to challenge me properly and see what happens. For a moment, Corvin looked like he might do exactly that. Might shift and lunge and force the confrontation into physical combat. But even rage couldn't overcome the reality. He was old, and Damien was in his prime. A fight would end badly. Corvin turned and stalked from the amphitheater, taking his supporters with him. The threat of future problems was clear in his rigid spine, but for now he was beaten. The remaining pack surged forward, not threatening but curious. Wanting to meet their Luna, to see the woman who'd stood trial by fire and emerged unbroken. Maren found herself surrounded by faces, some wary, some welcoming, all adjusting to a new reality. Damien's hand found hers, anchoring her through the chaos. Through the bond, she felt his pride, his relief, his overwhelming love. You did it, he murmured against her ear. You incredible, stubborn, magnificent woman, you actually did it. We did it, Marin corrected. Together. And as the full moon reached its apex overhead, bathing the packlands in silver light, Marin finally let herself believe it. She was free. She was home. And she was finally enough. 3 weeks passed before Marin truly understood what she'd won that night. Not just freedom. Not just acceptance. But the chance to become something she'd never imagined possible. A protector instead of a victim. A leader instead of a sacrifice. A woman who stood beside her mate as an equal, not a burden to be hidden or a weapon to be controlled. The pack's borders held. Not because of stolen power or ritual magic, but because Marin walked them every night with Damien at her side. The silver flame didn't drain her now, it flowed through her like breathing, natural and controlled. When rival scouts approached, they saw her standing at the territory line, fire dancing harmlessly along her arms, and they turned back. Word spread quickly. The Blackwood pack had a silver flame bearer. A real one. And she was done being caged. Corvin disappeared the night of the trial. Some said he'd fled to neutral territory, too proud to accept his defeat. Others whispered he was planning something darker, gathering support from packs who still believed in the old brutal ways. Marin didn't know which was true. But she knew he wasn't gone forever. Men like Corvin never really left, they just waited for another opportunity. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, Marin stood at the moon shrine with Damien, watching silver light pool across the ancient altar. They'd come here often in the past weeks, drawn by something neither could quite name. A sense of completion. Of rightness. Do you ever regret it? Marin asked quietly. Everything you gave up to save me? Damien pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her waist. I didn't give up anything that mattered. The council members who left were poisoning us from within. The pack members who chose fear over courage would have been a liability eventually. And my crown. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Means nothing if I have to wear it while watching innocent people suffer. Still, it was a risk. The best things always are. He turned her to face him, his golden eyes serious. You stood in front of the entire pack and chose courage over safety. Chose to stay and fight when running would have been easier. That's not the action of someone broken, Marin. That's the action of someone who is always strong. You just finally had the chance to show it. Marin leaned into him, letting his warmth chase away the lingering ghosts of doubt. She wasn't completely healed. Probably never would be. The scars on her wrists would always be there, silver-touched and permanent. The nightmares still came sometimes, vivid and cruel, sending her bolting awake convinced she was back in chains. But Damien was always there to remind her. To anchor her. To pull her back into the present where she was safe and free and loved. Grandmother Sable told me something yesterday, Marin said. About the prophecy. The one that said a silver flame bearer would either burn the old world to ash or forge it anew. And she thinks I'm doing both. Burning away the corruption, the belief that power can be stolen without consequence, that some lives matter less than others, that cruelty is acceptable if it's convenient. But also forging something new. A pack built on integrity instead of fear. On protecting the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Sounds about right. Damien's smile was proud. You've been teaching combat to the younger wolves. Training them to defend themselves instead of relying on dominant pack members to do it for them. That's revolutionary in its own way. It's practical. We can't afford to have half our pack be helpless if something happens to the warriors. See? That's exactly what I mean. You look at problems and find solutions instead of excuses. He cupped her face in his hands. The pack is stronger because of you, Marin. Not despite you. Because of you. She wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the ways she was still struggling, still learning, still sometimes overwhelmed by the simple act of existing without fear. But the truth was there in Damien's eyes, reflected back through the mate bond. He meant every word. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, she was learning to believe him. A sound from the forest made them both turn. Talia emerged from the trees, her expression urgent. "My king, my Luna, we have visitors at the southern border." Damien's hand went to the blade at his hip. "Who?" "A delegation from the Ironwood Pack. They're asking to speak with the Silver Flamebearer." Talia's gaze found Marin's. "They say they have others like you. Women with old magic who've been contained. They want to know if the rumors are true. If you really freed yourself. If there's hope for the ones still in chains." Marin's breath caught. Other women. Other Silver Flame Bearers or similar bloodlines, trapped the way she'd been trapped. Suffering the way she'd suffered. And they were reaching out, daring to hope that maybe freedom was possible. She looked at Damien. Saw her own determination reflected in his face. "Tell them we'll meet them," Marin said. "Tonight. At the border. And tell them the chains are broken. And we're coming to help break theirs too." Talia nodded and disappeared back into the forest. Damien took Marin's hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You know what this means. If we help them, we'll be interfering in other packs' business. Could start a war. I know. We might make powerful enemies. Alphas who see their control threatened. I know that too. And you still want to do this?" Marin looked at the moon shrine, at the altar where her ancestors had stood and made oaths to protect the innocent. At the silver veins still glowing softly in response to her presence. At the man beside her who'd shown her that love didn't have to come with chains. "I spent 5 years as someone's tool," she said quietly. 5 years believing I deserved every moment of suffering. If there are other women out there who feel that way, who've been convinced their pain is necessary, who don't know they're worth saving, her grip tightened on Damien's hand. Then yes, I want to do this. I have to do this. Because someone broke my chains. And now it's my turn to break theirs. Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Then we do it together. As we do everything. Together," Marin agreed. They stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other and moonlight, preparing for the battles ahead. Because there would be battles. Corvin was still out there, plotting. Other packs would resist change. And freeing women who'd been treated as resources would upset the balance of power across territories. But Marin had learned something in the past weeks. Something that 5 years of chains had tried to beat out of her but failed. She was not a curse. She was not a sacrifice. She was not too much or too dangerous or too broken to deserve love and freedom and a place to belong. She was a silver flame bearer. A Luna. A woman who'd walked through hell and emerged on the other side, still capable of choosing compassion over cruelty, courage over comfort, hope over despair. And she was done apologizing for it. The moon rose higher, painting them both in silver light. Somewhere at the southern border, women waited in chains, daring to hope. Somewhere in neutral territory, Corvin schemed his return. Somewhere in the Packlands, children slept safe because Marin walked the borders with fire in her hands and love in her heart. This was her life now. Not the one she'd been born into. Not the one that had been forced upon her. But the one she'd chosen for herself, fought for, nearly died for. And it was finally, beautifully, impossibly hers. Would you have chosen her? Would you have stood beside a woman everyone called cursed and said, "No, she's powerful, not broken"? Would you have looked at someone bleeding in chains and decided they were worth risking everything for? Or would you have walked away, convinced yourself it was necessary, told yourself that some sacrifices are justified if enough people benefit? Marin didn't have that choice. She was the one in chains, the one bleeding, the one everyone agreed was expendable. But she had a different choice, to believe them or to believe something else. To accept that she was a curse or to fight for the truth that she was simply powerful in a world afraid of power. She chose to fight. And in fighting, she changed everything. Not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been taught her strength was dangerous. Every person who'd been told their pain was necessary. Every soul convinced they were too broken to deserve love. The Alpha King saw something that night. Not rebellion. Not danger. Not a problem to be solved. He saw a person. And that simple act of recognition, of choosing to see someone everyone else had written off, changed the fate of an entire pack. So ask yourself, who are you in this story? Are you the one who breaks chains? Or the one who builds them? Are you the voice that says this is wrong when everyone else stays silent? Or the one who convinces themselves that cruelty is acceptable if the results are convenient? Are you brave enough to stand with the cursed, the broken, the ones everyone else has decided are expendable? Because here's the truth the council didn't want you to know. The cursed ones, the broken ones, the ones everyone thinks are too much or too dangerous or too different, they're not problems waiting to be solved. They're revolutions waiting to happen. And when you give them a chance to burn bright instead of burning out, they don't just save themselves. They save everyone. If this story lit something inside you, if it made you feel seen or understood or reminded you that being powerful doesn't make you a curse, then subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Because here, we tell tales that burn. Stories about women who refuse to be caged. About men who choose honor over convenience. About mates who break each other's chains instead of building new ones. About power used to protect instead of destroy. About the kind of love that doesn't demand you be smaller, quieter, safer, but celebrates exactly how much fire you carry. We tell stories about the cursed, the broken, the too much women who everyone else gave up on. And we show them becoming queens, warriors, saviors, legends. We tell stories where soft and strong aren't opposites. Where trauma doesn't make you unlovable. Where survival is just the beginning, not the end. We tell stories that remind you, you're not too much. The world is too small. And the right person will look at your fire and say not you're dangerous, but you're magnificent. Hit that subscribe button. Join the pack. Because the best stories aren't the ones that play it safe. They're the ones that dare to burn. This story belongs to you now. To everyone who's ever been told they were too much. Too broken. Too dangerous to exist free. You're not a curse. You're a revolution. And the world better be ready.